All right, everybody, we are back for a new episode of Content is for Closers. New interview episode today. Carlton, you have heard it. It's your job to describe the person in such a way that people won't click out of this in the next 17 seconds. Go.
Oh, I love it. So we have Johnny Podcast. He's that's not his real name. That's just his pseudonym.
It's his given name, right?
Yeah, it's his given name. He is a podcast producer, so he's not your typical guest that is going on podcasts all the time. He's the one engineering them, making it sound good. So he's got a great mic. We'll say that about him up front. And his background is really just making it himself, right? He didn't go to school for audio engineering. And I love this about a lot of different people that can basically pull themselves up by their bootstraps, start doing it for somebody, figure it out, do it in a way that's excellent, and then just grow from there. And he's producing for some really big name podcasts right now, and just doing a great job with it, and offers some really interesting insights for how to grow your own podcast and how to build an audience.
Yeah, so many of our audience are here because we talk about a lot of things. We talk about content, we talk about marketing, we talk about business, but podcasts is what we were born from and what we focus on. And Johnny is a fellow podcast warrior. You know, he's doing this every single day. He's staying on the current edge of what's happening in terms of trends and technology and all those sorts of things. So we talked about a bunch of those things, but his story of how he got started, how he really failed at another position at a more traditional, on a more traditional career route. And that brought him to where he is today, which is much better than what the alternative would have been had he succeeded, I think is really encouraging and inspiring. And I think anyone who enjoys hearing entrepreneurial stories will enjoy this one as well.
Yeah, I think as far as takeaways go, there's two things I would say. One is for younger people that maybe we've got some aspiring maybe engineers or artists or content producers that listen to this. He did the old internship move, which is you just get an internship with somebody and learn on the job. And I love that. There are people who, look for the traditional internship role where it says, hey, we're looking for an internship. And then there's people that can just jump in there and say, hey, I've got free time. Can I do this for you? Can I learn as we go? I'm not an expert, but I just want to intern or I want to join you as you work on this. And I think it's a phenomenal in for getting with people who have experience, who have knowledge, but maybe aren't broadcasting that they need help. So that's one for the young folks.
Also,
maybe
with
people
that
just want to change careers.
Yeah, 1A, if that's you, shout out to your boys because we're always looking for interns and talent. Our last intern is now copywriter Tristan. She used to be intern Tristan. She's full-time Tristan. That could be you as well. So reach out on that one. Good one. What's your other takeaway?
And then I was going to say for maybe people that are in the podcast industry and a little bit more experience, he talks about this idea of a mini series. And I know we're all intimidated by the idea of people coming back week after week after week, listening to our podcast, being dedicated, basically being committed to a certain amount of podcasts. And that's intimidating. So one thing that you can do, even if you can't commit to doing this on a weekly and a really frequent cadence, you can produce a quality mini series. Maybe it's 4 episodes, maybe it's 6 episodes, maybe it's 8 episodes, like a typical TV series, and make it awesome. Get the highest profile guests you can and tell them this is we're only doing this for 6 episodes. I want you to be part of this special series on the topic they're an expert in. And get those people to come on, and so that they can speak to and give authority to the topic that you're discussing. So I think that was a good insight that he has. Don't want to steal his thunder, but without any further ado, unless you have something, Adam,
let's go.
We can jump to the episode.
All right, we are back with another episode of Content is for Closers and a special guest this week, the hardest working Johnny in podcasts. Johnny Podcast. Thanks for joining us, dude.
Adam, dude, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we've already gotten off air to a good start, talking hoops, talking Ben Simmons, unfortunately, talking about Twitter. I feel like this could go a number of different ways. But first of all, let me, you're a podcast host. So you said you had
technically no.
Oh,
I'm a podcast producer. I don't host my own show, but my full-time job is doing audio and video production for other people who have podcasts. So this is one of the few times I actually get to be the focal point and be on the mic and talking.
Cool. Well, in that role, you said you had a couple of potentially basketball related questions. To
yes.
Kick us off.
Since you're a Philly guy, I saw this on your Twitter and I've been pocketing this question ever since we scheduled this podcast.
Okay.
I need to know your take on Ben Simmons from the jump. Get me from when he passed up that dunk at the end of the playoffs against the Hawks, which was kind of like the snowball that turned into the giant rolling boulder down the hill that became the last year for you guys.
Yeah, I would say the boulder started rolling down the hill like 4 years prior to that. Well, really, when they fired Hinkie, like the boulder started to crush our souls and all of our collective minds. The moment that they fired Hinkie didn't want to draft Simmons. So my first take is he never should have been a Sixer. Hinkie would never have made the Fultz trade to give the Celtics Tatum, for two draft slots. And so even if he did get forced to take Simmons, like he got forced to take Jahlil Okafor or other people, then he would have built better around him. But it's just a nonstop nightmare of being a Sixer fan, being a Philly fan. I mean, Simmons, whatever. It seems like he's going through stuff. He's dressing like a clown on the sidelines of playoff games.
Dude, why would you dress like that with the amount of attention on you? I just like the best thing I saw on Twitter was that he looked like a Skittle.
Yeah. And especially when he knew, like you said, there was attention on him because that was the game that, all year Rich Paul's like, he's going to be here for game 4. He's going to be here for game 4. Can't even show up and then dresses like that. But it's a bit, I mean, look at Harden. We get Harden and he, seemingly sometimes forgets to shoot. So it's something with us. It's happened too many times now where I can't blame it fully on Simmons. And look, yes, he should have dunked the ball in Atlanta and we probably would have won that game and moved on, but we got to the same place. We actually got one game less once we got rid of him. So it's not all on his shoulders.
Yeah, it can't all be on his fault. It's just, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was out of the league in 2 years, just because he's just these guys are just such head cases, and you can handle it with some players like a Kyrie Irving. You can kind of handle his off the court antics, but with someone like Ben, it's like, have you earned it to act like a complete diva?
Yeah, I don't think too weird of a player anyway to layer that off the court thing on top of it. Well,
and why don't you want to shoot? I don't under the whole like. You look at 7th graders now, they're pulling up from half court because all they want to do is be Steph Curry. Yeah. How do you not even want to shoot jumpers? But anyway,
he's built different in a bad way.
He's built different. His back is built completely different.
Yeah. But thank God we don't have to talk about the Sixers on this anymore. But I was looking through your background, through your Twitter and some of the shows that you produce. Obviously, we produce shows as well. And one of the things that caught my attention was just the variety of shows that you produce. You have a bunch of different shows with a bunch of different kinds of hosts. And so it just led me to think, like, how does he connect with all these people? How did you cultivate that? And I was just curious, what was your first job? Like, how did you get started in your work
in
career?
Podcasting?
No. Just in general.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that relates somehow to your business now. But I'm just curious how you
yeah. So this wasn't my first job. I've worked ever since I was like 15. I don't know what it was. I just liked having extra pocket money. So I've worked at typical places. I worked at Jamba Juice. I worked at Chipotle, so I can fold a nasty burrito. If you ever need a burrito folded, I'm your guy.
I always do.
And when I was a junior in college, I went to Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, and my junior year, everyone's getting internships and I'm working at the rec center, sitting at a desk, checking people in for $8 an hour. And, I have just anxiety through the roof 24/7 because I've sent out like 30 applications for internships to just random different places, majoring in marketing, no real direction on what I wanted to do. And I finally get one internship at this tech company. And I was like, I've made it. You know, I've got an internship. I'm going to have a job. My life's going to turn out okay. I'm not going to end up living in a box on the side of the road, which is, you know, over exaggerating, but that's where my mind was at. And I show up to this internship and it's your typical 9 to 5. Just can I curse on this podcast?
Sure.
Just complete bullshit. Like, oh my God. Like they had me working on spreadsheets and they were really nice guys. You know, I had no bad will against the company. It just wasn't a good fit. I was falling asleep during meetings as an intern. Like normally as an intern, you're supposed to be the high energy guy doing whatever it is you want, like just to get a job. And it was no surprise that they didn't ask me to return as a full-time employee just because I did nothing. They didn't ask me to do anything and I had no drive to do anything. And so that really showed me like, okay, I have no direction. I don't know what I want to do. And before I got to TCU, I was a college basketball player. So I played college hoops for a couple years in California. And so I said, okay, I had always loved podcasting. I don't know what the medium was about it, but just listening to someone, I love comedy podcasts. So the first show I fell in love with was Congratulations by Chris D'Elia. I started listening to him in 2017.
Okay. Yeah.
And halfway through this internship, I was just going to be like, I said, screw it. I'm just going to start a podcast. Maybe I can start making money off it. So I start this basketball podcast with the classic Blue Yeti USB microphone in my closet, just recording with that.
Awesome.
And just kind of taught myself how to do it. And my senior year rolls around. I have no direction once again. And I'm sitting in one of my marketing classes and I happen to brag about having a podcast, as all people with a podcast do. They mention it's the same as being a vegan.
Yeah.
If you're a vegan, you tell it, or CrossFit, you tell everybody about it within 5 seconds of meeting them. So I bring it up in class and my professor goes, "Hey, Johnny, why don't you stick around after class?" And she goes, "There's an alumni who's looking to start a podcast. Can you help them?" And I'd been doing mine for like 3 months. I barely know what I'm doing. I'm teaching myself editing, production. I think all my podcasts are like peaking like crazy. I think I'm like +6 decibels on all of my podcasts. Just haven't figured out all this crap yet.
Yeah.
But I lie and I go, absolutely, I can help him. And so I Google this guy is actually Chris Powers, who's on one of my Twitter profile, or one of the names on my profile that I produce for. And I put together this whole one sheet for him. I did all this research on him. He's this real estate guru in Fort Worth. And I'm like, okay, here's 15 names that we could call the podcast. Here's 20 different topics that we could do the podcast about. Here's a list of every single real estate executive in Fort Worth that you could interview. Here's all the equipment you're going to need. Here's how we'll get started. Put it all on this one sheet, put on my suit and tie, show up to him. He just takes one look at the one sheet and just goes, throws it to the side and goes, "You're hired." And he's like, "I've never been blown away more by someone being so prepared for it." And I went, wait, this is such a different aspect between how I approached the internship versus how I approached this first meeting. And so me and him just figured it out from there. We figured out all of the equipment that we needed. We set up in his office to start recording. And so I kind of did a faux internship for him for the entirety of my senior year. And graduation's rolling around and he goes, "What do you want to do?" I mean, he's like, "I think you could make a legitimate business out of this. You don't have to produce just for me. There's a ton of people that I know that you could do this for." And so he and I partnered together. He funded me for 1 year, wrote me a really small check just to keep my lights on for the year so I could get a base of clients going. And that was in 2018. And, 4.5 years later, I produced podcasts full time. I've moved, grown my skill set from just audio. I now do video and produce for people all across the country, universities, business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, people like that. And a lot of it has been through Chris. A lot of these people come on his podcast. They get introduced to me. I follow them on Twitter. They follow me back. I get shouted out online. People DM me. And that's really, it's all a word of mouth kind of referral business for me.
So it wasn't that you lacked drive or that you didn't have some, it factor at the agency you were at or whatever it was, the tech startup. It was just not the right, it hadn't clicked yet. Why do you think it clicked so clearly when you got the opportunity to not even work for Chris, but just pitch him?
I think it was, I'm a big believer in that everyone, and I guess this is somewhat controversial because a lot of people do jobs that they hate. And so this kind of rubs those people the wrong way. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that at some point in everybody's lives, you will find exactly what it is that you're meant to do. And it happens to people at different stages of their life. And it may take you 2 or 3 career changes to figure out what that is. And maybe it's a passion that you decide not to pursue your career around. A great alternative I've heard to that is you can use your 9 to 5 to fund your passions that you do outside of the office, which I think is a fantastic approach as well, and probably the right way for most people. But for me, it clicked when I was 22, and it's podcasting. And I just knew this is what I love to do. I don't love real estate. I don't love tech, but those are the shows that I produce for. But I love the medium of podcasting. And I love that something that I would normally spend 8 hours listening to podcasts every single day, now I get to work in them and figure out how they work and learn audio engineering. And, that takes a kind of passion to teach yourself how to do. I didn't go to Full Sail University and get an audio production and degree. This is a completely self-taught.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about that for a little bit, because I don't get to really do like inside baseball with other podcast producers often.
No, let's do it.
When it comes to the medium, what is it that excites you so much, or why are you so bullish on it? Because I mean, betting your career on it, which I have as well, is a big step. So, what is it about the medium that's so attractive to you?
I think it's just a feeling, honestly. I love, people love to hear themselves talk. And I think I equate it a lot to like television or television news. If you look at the news, and this is not meant to be political, but you only get like a 5-second blurb into what somebody really thinks. With podcasting, your time is your own. I can spend 3.5 hours discussing the minutia of how this microphone works and the best microphone techniques and why you need to have it here and not here because the audio is just going to be better. You don't get that in any other medium. And so the way that it's dissimilar to YouTube is very visual and it's its own medium in its own right. But podcasting, I can put it in my pocket and I can listen to 2 comedians make me crack up like crazy for 2 hours while I'm getting groceries, driving to Austin, going to the gym, working out. It's just in my pocket. And there's just such a wide variety of content out there. And it just has opened up so much career opportunity for so many people to make their living off of doing podcasting.
Yeah. Based on the interests I'm just gathering so far, if you haven't heard the podcast, The Rights to Ricky Sanchez.
I have not. I'm going to write it down.
Okay. It's they call themselves the Only Sixers podcast, which is
okay.
But it's a comedy writer named Mike Levin. He's written for How I Met Your Mother.
I've heard the name.
Yeah. He's written a bunch of stuff. And Spike Eskin, he's part of one of the historic sports families in Philly, and you don't have to like the Sixers at all. It's just if you like basketball and you like comedy, that's what that show is. So
beautiful.
Yeah, you'd probably appreciate it.
And that's how podcasting grows, is word of mouth. People always ask me, how do I grow my podcast? What's the best marketing strategy? What agencies should I partner with to grow my podcast? That stuff works, but the best way that you can get your podcast to grow is to have the content that makes an impact on someone like you, Adam, that inspires you to tell me you need to go listen to this. And there's a lot of factors that go into the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast where it has to be really good and it has to be at a certain level for you to put your reputation online and be like, I'm going to actually recommend this to somebody else.
Yeah, 100%. So digging a little bit more into the medium of it, I feel like obviously there's like an intimacy that comes with podcasting that you really can't. I mean, look, I know you for 13 minutes and like we're having this conversation. Almost no other medium would allow that. I mean, maybe I could just be like, hey, do you want to jump on a call? But that's kind of weird and nobody does. Yeah. And this feels like natural just based on the medium that we're using. What do you see as it evolves, as it gets better? Like, what are you seeing that you're like, yeah, I could see that as an improvement to podcasting? I'll give you an example. It feels like right now, a lot of podcasts, especially people who are just starting, start with like their equivalent of a radio show. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's just like, yeah, let's talk about the news in our industry, just like NPR would, or just like whoever would on the radio. And I think that's going to change and continue to change. And, there's personality-based podcasts, there's interview-based podcasts, like all that stuff. But what are you seeing that you're like, I think that's where the medium is headed as we continue down the road here?
So do you know the statistic behind the amount of podcasts that are in the average person's weekly rotation?
No, I don't.
It's 8 shows.
That's actually higher than I would have thought.
It's higher than you would have thought of, but still it's less than 10. And if you think about, I think there's like 2 million podcasts that are currently out there now. So if you and I were to start a podcast right now, we have to approach it with the idea of, okay, how do we crack our audience, our target audience members' top 8? Can we get in there on a recurring weekly basis? That is very difficult, and probably the answer is no. So where do we go from here? We still want to have a podcast. What I'm really interested in right now, and this is something that I've recently been thinking about, is taking after the Netflix binge model and doing short, limited series, just a quick 6-episode run. Because what I want to do is I want to drive the audience member to something else. I know I'm probably not going to monetize this podcast, but I know that I can make money through it indirectly if that's your goal. So let's say that I'll take Chris. I'm just going to use Chris as an example. Sure. So Chris uses his podcast to drive people to invest in his company's real estate fund. So that's how the podcast indirectly makes money for him.
Right.
If you and I wanted to do that, what we would do is, instead of trying to crack somebody's top 8, you and I could do a 6-episode extreme deep dive on how to do the perfect real estate deal. It's going to be 6 episodes. It's going to be extremely highly produced, and we're going to be very selective with the guests that we bring on, who are the absolute top 1% in their field. People can listen through to it once without having to worry about, I need to have this on every single week and get this into my rotation. They can take it, learn my name, take the information away from it, something that's really actionable, and walk away. And that still made a huge imprint on them. And it doesn't have to just be one season. We can do one every 6 months. We could do one every quarter, but we're doing something that is in a really short time frame, really short number of episodes. So that is kind of the hack around of getting into somebody's top rotation and getting people to actually listen to your content.
Yeah. That's a great idea. We've seen that a little bit, but it hasn't taken off yet as a full trend, I wouldn't say. And also, all of those things are probably evergreen in terms of the.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the other thing you have to implement into it too. It needs to be evergreen. If it's like you said, if it's like a radio show or a news program, if you don't catch somebody on that 24-hour period, the news cycle moves so quickly and industries change so fast. Your episode is already outdated after like a month.
Yeah. So let's just break that down a little bit. Let's say that you were going to do that for Chris or for someone else. I think one of the challenges is finding a storyline that makes sense and that really value, because the tendency and the temptation is for the customer, for the host, I should say, to make themselves the center of attention, right? Like that's the big thing you see in podcasts. Like you said, every host of a podcast wants to be the guy or the girl. And then they tell everyone that they have a podcast. Like, it's my podcast. But the successful ones connect directly to some bit of customer value and are able to. So if you're doing a mini series, then it like is all the more, you have very few reps and it's in this concentrated, fashion to be able to show that value. We use like the hero's journey model to try to develop a story. Is there anything that you have that is helpful for that creative process?
I don't have like a necessarily like the hero's journey, archetype structure that you would need. But if it were me and I were advising a client on this, I would assume that the host is going to be doing a podcast on a field that they're a professional in. So it's going to be within their profession. Now we need to knit your profession. So we'll take the world of real estate just because we're on that topic. If you're going to take the entire world of real estate and you are an expert in just residential real estate, so you focus on exclusively helping people buy homes, and now we need to niche down even further. If you're going to do a mini series, it has to be so concentrated on one small aspect that's also super important to the person. So let's pick choosing your realtor. So now we've gone from the entire arena of real estate all the way down to residential real estate, all the way down to how do you find the perfect real estate agent for your home buying journey. And you do just 6 episodes about that. So I would recommend you niche down as absolutely as much as possible, because there's such a wide audience for just even that small niche of content.
Yeah. And then would you brand that like 6 ways, or would it be a broader concept that can have multiple seasons within it? Does that make sense?
I think I would I think the first season would just be picking your realtor, and then it would all be just kind of subsets of the home buying process within residential real estate. And so the next season would probably be like choosing the market that you want to live in. something like that, or determining like how much, how homes are valued. How do you determine whether the home you're looking at is properly priced? Something like that.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that idea from a content production standpoint. I really like it from a promotion standpoint because, as you know, podcasts are so difficult to find. They're so difficult to share. And just like Netflix, 6 months before their new original series comes out, you start seeing clips, you start seeing promotions. It doesn't have to be that much of a lead time for a podcast season, but
I would say like a month for a podcast is kind of when you want to start marketing it and putting it out there.
Yeah. And it gives you all of that lead time to be able to start the conversation in different places and hopefully drive people to your eventual execution. That's really, have you done much of the miniseries thing yet?
No, this is just kind of something in the last couple of months that's been playing around in my head. I'm toying with doing one myself, just to kind of so I can really figure out what goes into a great miniseries. But all of the podcasts that I focus on are recurring episodes.
Gotcha. Yeah, if you do, let us know. I'd love to listen. I'd love to hear more. More.
You want to talk about it now?
Good ones. Oh, do you have an idea?
I have an idea now. Yeah. I just haven't I haven't put pen to paper completely. But so the idea is a 6-episode run, and this is all trademarked, folks. So you can't steal this.
Don't steal it. Yeah,
it's not.
It's verbally trademarked.
It's verbally that's what's that show? That's a verbal agreement.
Yeah.
So the idea is called Why We Pod. And so the idea would be I would interview basically probably my 3 top clients along with 3 other people that I don't know, just because you have that personal relationship. It's easier to talk to people you know, and then I can branch out to people that I don't know. But basically it's most interview podcasts are like, so where are you from? How'd you grow up? Things like that. Why are you in the career that you're in? Mm-hmm. I really want to focus on why this person has a podcast and how it's improving their business, their life, helping them scratch that creative itch. So it would really be a deep dive into the pitfalls they ran into along the way, the technology that they're using, what microphone are you using, what does your setup look like, how do you record with guests online? And if I'm the producer, then I would probably touch more on that if I'm producing their show. But basically deep diving into why they have a podcast so people can see across a variety of industries. Like I do one with a guy who runs a meat packing company. Basically, they make bacon. And they have a podcast for their company. Why the hell do you have a podcast? How do you exactly? So something like that. So that's just kind of the idea that I'm toying with right now.
I love that. I love I already have visions of like the trailer of hearing like music and then hearing the voice talking about meat packing and like, and immediately it's like, what is this? And then you talk about the fact they have a podcast. Yeah, I really like that idea. I love specifically what I like about it is the personal experience of it. And you said, how does this scratch your creative itch? And I think that is such an underrated part of podcasting. Like Eric Jacobson has been on our show before. He's coming on again soon. He runs Lemon Pie, which is another production company. And they have a show called Brands That Podcast. And it's really good. People should check it out. But
Eric, I'm going to steal all the good ideas you've done from that podcast and put it on mine.
Well, I think the big difference right off the bat is like the individual, right? Like you could talk about why Salesforce has a podcast, but to talk about why, whoever Johnny Peterson has a podcast and how that allows him to make personal connections and like act like a show writer and scratch that creative itch. Like that is so much of it and is so important to the creative process of podcasting. So I think that's a great idea.
It's another thing. It's another thing too of onto the creative itch thing. And when people approach me that want to start a podcast there, and I'm sure you've dealt with this too, people will approach you about wanting to start a podcast because they think it will make them money. A core critical aspect of someone having having longevity in their podcast is they have to actually enjoy it. They have to be like, yeah, I listen to podcasts. I like podcasting, not just, hey, podcasting's hot right now. NFTs are hot right now. Crypto shit coins are hot right now. I want to get into it. There has to be the passion behind it for it to succeed. And I think a lot of people don't really take that into consideration.
Yeah, totally agree. We've been doing this show, a version of this show for like 4 years now. It's had different names, but like, there's no way we would be still doing this and having these conversations were it not for just the love of talking to other people who are creating. you know.
100%.
We've made money for sure, but it's not like we make money on an episode basis because we have so many sponsors signing up, you know. So
Yeah.
There's definitely that component to it. Well, Johnny, this has been great. The only other thing I was going to ask you about was trends, any or specific projects that you have coming up that you're specifically excited about. We kind of talked a little bit about trends, but anything else?
I don't have any, like I said, I have that podcast in the back of my mind. It's funny. Like I want to create more content, but I'm sure you've gotten this too. You just get so wrapped up in creating content for other people that it's hard, to find the time to do it yourself. I do have kind of a bold trend prediction for podcasting long term. I know in our previous chat, it was like, what do you predict in the next 12 months? I don't know if this will happen in the next 12 months, but I think long term, I think that every single company, every single university, every single entity, LLC, whatever it is going to have a podcast. And it will be the same. It will be as table stakes as having a website for your company is having a podcast. And I'm kind of I work with some companies that are implementing podcasting into their, into their work processes. And I think if you want to reach your target customer and you want to create a intimate relationship with the people that you want their money, whether it's for your product or your service or whatever it is, you need to have a podcast. And it doesn't have to be your CEO. It doesn't have to be your VP of sales, but it's got to be somebody from the company that is doing a company focused podcast, talking about what you're doing and showing that you care about improving whatever industry that you're in, or at least showing your passion for that industry. And so that's kind of what I think is going to happen in the future.
Okay. So I agree with you. Obviously, I'm doing the same thing. And when I say statements like this is some of the pushback that I get. How do you, if that is true, which I believe it is, but putting that aside, then how will companies be able to create a show, create a podcast that isn't white noise, right? Because if everyone has a podcast, nobody has a podcast, like kind of that idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that sort of happened with blogs, and we're so far from having the critical mass of blogs. But
yeah,
just in your mind, what are some things that you do, or how do you see that happening to where it's effective, despite the fact that the volume is going to go up, and it has gone up, and it will continue to go up?
Yeah, I think a lot of these companies that already have kind of the name brand recognition definitely have a head start, but I think this doesn't apply necessarily only to companies, but I think you need to be bigger online somewhere else in order to have a successful podcast. So when I talk to people about they want to grow their audience base, I say you got to get big on Twitter. You got to get big on LinkedIn. You got to be big on Instagram. You already have to have eyeballs somewhere in order to drive them to your podcast. So if you're starting your company out, you need to have some kind of viral moment, viral product, viral service that people know about, and then use that to drive them to your podcast. Because if you're kind of just Joe Schmo everyday advertising tech company, no one cares that you have a podcast.
Right. Yeah. So I would layer on top of that too. I agree with that 100%. I think to your mini series idea earlier, like it's when you layer on, lenses of specificity that you become a unique voice, and you have a story that you can tell that nobody else can tell. Like, and that could look a bunch of different ways. We have a medical construction materials company who does a podcast. Like, no one else is really talking about that. Yeah, that's super niche. But even if if you're not that niche, even if you're a landscaping company in a specific area, well, there might be 1 million landscaping podcasts, 100 landscaping podcasts, whatever. But there's probably not 100 landscaping podcasts that are focused on specifically lawn maintenance that are also in the same geo location as you. That, you know what I mean? Like, the more layers you keep adding of specificity.
Yeah, absolutely. So to not become the white noise, you can't be the white noise. The white noise of podcasting is I'm just going to be broad, general industry interviewing, kind of just interviewing people, and there's no real flavor behind it that makes us anything different. So if you want to succeed and not be in white noise, you need to niche, get drilled down into the absolute deepest, darkest corners of your industry, maybe some of the ones that people don't talk about. And I think that if you want to set yourself apart, these companies are going to have to kind of set aside hey, we might get some backlash on this on Twitter, but screw those people. They're not the ones spending money on our products. Yeah. We need to move away from the whole politically correct world. We need to talk the way that normal people talk.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that combined with being super niche and really showing your passion and knowledge for your industry. And again, deep, dark corners of your industry. That's how you set yourself apart.
Deep dark corners might have to be the title of this episode. That's a great,
I love it.
Great takeaway. Well, Johnny, it's been awesome getting to know you and connect with you. If people want to follow what you're doing, maybe see some future mini series, everything else that you're working on, where can they keep track of you?
I'm super easy. Just follow me on Twitter at Johnny Podcasts.
Great name. I love it. How did you come up with that name?
My last name is Peterson, and my old handle was Johnny Threederson, which was like a basketball thing because I used to shoot. I was the white kid they stuck in the corner to shoot threes, and so Threederson, Peterson, and then Johnny. There's Johnny this, Johnny that, Johnny whatever is kind of a used trope, and I don't think anyone had taken Johnny Podcasts. So luckily, the Twitter handle was available.
Awesome. Well, we'll link that, of course, below, and I appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to catch up again with you soon.
Appreciate it, Adam.